As part of our bridge between V'sein Talamotu Levracha in Hagyoni Halacha and Chanukah, which hopefully will start next week, Be'ezer Hashem, entering into the month of Kislev, I wanted to give a shiur which is sort of an introduction to Melecha Shabbos. Obviously, Masechta Shabbos is very complicated, made up of many different parts and different dimensions, but Melachos is certainly up there in the big leagues. And it's not so clear exactly how to define Melachos, as each malacha and how it's related to another. There's malachos and Toldos. There are halachas, for example, of what's called chiluk malachos. If you violate many malachos b'shogeg, are you chai for each malacha, or do you bring one chatas for all the malachos? And there's a very important tosis that we want to begin with. It's almost like an introduction to Masechta Shabbos, which I thought would be interesting. And that's on Ayin Gimel and Beis, which is the Sugya of Malachos. And Tosis wants to know, when a person violates on Shabbos a Tolda, and we have to give him a Hasra in order to punish him, what should we mention in the Hasra? Should we name the Tolda, or should we name its Av? And Tosis has a deal from the Gemara that says, "Hanoteav ha'mavrich ha'markiv chayav mishum zorea," and Tosfos assumes that chayav mishum zorea means that he's chayav because of zorea, which means if you want to give masra and warn him not to violate Shabbos, well, what is the violation? The violation is not notea, nor mavrich, nor markiv. It's only zorea, so that you have to warn him for zorea. Tosfos says, "Ein lo hochiach mikan." I'm not going to accept a foolproof raya from here that tzarich lahasos hatoldu b'makom av. And what the Gemara is talking about here is not the requirement of hasra, but you have to know which av a particular tolda belongs to, in event that he gave him a hasra b'shem ha'av, meaning that if he did X, which is a tolda of one malach, and instead they gave him hasra for another av malach, then that would not be a valid hasra. It doesn't mean that when you give a hasra to someone for notea, you have to mention zorea. That far you don't have to go. But on the other hand, if you mention meleches kotzer, for example, then he would laugh at you. I'm not involved here in meleches kotzer. I'm planting something, and the hasra would not be valid. But if, on the other hand, you told him, watch out because you'll be violating meleches zorea, that would be a valid hasra. In any event, we see two very important things in Tosfos. Number one, that Tosfos is vacillating back and forth. In the case of a tolda, do you have to mention the av? Number two, Tosfos says that even if I hold that you don't have to mention the av, you could mention the av, and that would be a valid hasra, but you have to get it right and mention the correct av and not the wrong av. Now, Rav Soloveitchik points out that there's a premise here in Tosfos that doesn't necessarily have to be, because Tosfos is wavering back and forth whether Asra is b'shem HaTolda, whether Asra is b'shem HaAv. But one of the two is definitely required. Tosfos never doubts that you have to mention either the Tolda or the Av. Well, guess what? If you open up the Rambam says at the beginning of Hilchos Shabbos, just give him Asra not to violate the Shabbos. A general Asra would be sufficient. There's no need to mention neither the Av nor the Tolda. And the position of the Rambam is very attractive and very intuitive, because we have to give a person Asra not to violate the Torah law. The Torah doesn't mention any names of malachas, certainly not Toldos. The Torah just says, don't do malacha on Shabbos. So that's what you have to tell him. You have to warn him, says the Rambam, don't violate the Shabbos with a malacha. What malacha it is? Does the Maser have to be a big lamdin? Does the Musar have to be such a big Talmud Chacham? Leave it out. Just mention Chilul Shabbos. You're not allowed to be Machal Shabbos. You are desecrating the Shabbos. Why? How? What of? What Toldos? No need to mention. And yet Tosfos says you have to mention either the Toldos or the Av. And perhaps you always have to mention the Av. Tosfos doesn't have a proof to that position, but certainly you have a choice of either being Maser him b'shem ha'Toldos or being Maser him b'shem ha'Av. And you and I might think, well, this is a secondary issue about the nature of the Hasra, the Rambam his Shita, Tosfos is his. But in truth, when we plunge to the depth of this machlokas, we find that this is a fundamental issue. This is not a secondary technical issue. And in order to shed a light on this, what we're going to do is we're going to ask a fundamental question. What is the Isser of Shabbos? Is it Chilul Shabbos? And that subdivides up into 39 malachas. The 39 malachas are really just different ways and methods of violating the same Isser, which is Chilul Shabbos. Well, no. So we say that although we call it Chilul Shabbos, that's oversimplifying. There is no one single violation, one single avera here, but rather there are 39 malachas, and each malacha is a separate avera. When I give asra, according to the Rambam, all I have to do is mention that you're violating the Shabbos. I don't have to get into the specific way that you violated the Shabbos. For example, in Dam or in Chelev, I don't have to tell you, well, don't eat Chelev when you're standing on your head, and don't eat Chelev when you cooked it or when you roasted it or when you're sitting in your house, as Dr. Seuss would say. It's irrelevant. I just have to tell you, don't violate the Achilas Chelev. And therefore the Rambam says, don't be Mechal Shabbos. Because from the Rambam's perspective, the malachos do not set themselves up and generate separate shemos of Isser. It's all one shem Isser with different methods of violating the shem Isser. It's all the same time, whether you eat it this way or you eat it that way. Tosfos, on the other hand, understands that each malacha is a separate Isser. And I'll prove it to you. This is the most exciting part of what we're going to talk about today. We have a concept called a lav shebechlolos, which means that amongst the exceptions to the rule of Malchus, one category that does not generate Malchus is called a lav shebechlolos. We'll give an example. The Torah says, Lo sochlu al hadam. And there are a host of different isurim that we derive from that pasuk, including, by the way, that we don't eat before davening in the morning. But it has many different variations and permutations of this avera. That's called the lav shebechlolos. It means that there are many isurim, each one independent of the other, but they are recorded and formulated in the Torah as one lav. That's called the lav shebechlolos. Tosfos in Masechta Sanhedrin on Daf Samach Gimel postulates that malacha is a lav shebechlolos. And Tosfos says, I don't understand why the Gemara tells us in Masechta Beitza, Hamavashal Giranosha B'Yontif, Loke Chamesh. You know, this is one of those sugyas where the Gemara tries to come up with one Maisa or two Maisim, and you get a host, a myriad of Malchus. One of the Chiyuve Malchus for Mavashel Gidanoshe on Yontif is Meleches Bishul. So Tosfos says, I don't get it. How can you give Malchus for Meleches Bishul? It's a lav shebechlolos. Tichsiv kol Meleches Avoda lo sasu kimo lo siyavdim. Like the Torah says, don't worship Avodah Zarah. And there are many different isurim that are derived from that pasuk. You're not allowed to bow down to Avodah Zarah. You're not allowed to be mishamshing with Avodah Zarah. You can't make Avodah Zarah, whatever it is. Here also, Tosfos says, I don't understand how you can get Malchus for Mavash. Now, wait a second. What's Shaykhus Lav Shebechlolos? This is not Lav Shebechlolos. This is all one Isur. And it's not like the case of Lo Sochlo Al Adam. We have an Isur, Achilu Min HaBehema Kodem Shetetzei Nafsha. You have an Isur Lahavros, Lo Lahavros Al Harugei Bezdin. You have an Isur Lo Lecha Lifnei Shespal Al Dimchem, etc., etc. These are all one single Avera. And the answer is no. Tosfos is of the opinion that even though it says Kol Meleches Avodah Lo Sasu, it's many, many different Isurim. Mavashel is a separate Isur. And Otea is a separate Isur. And Kotzer is a separate Isur. And people go on and on through the list of the Malachas. Every Malacha sets itself up as a separate, independent Avera. And they all were gathered together under one lav in the Torah. Lo sasu kol meleches avoda. That is a lav shebechlos. According to the Rambam, Tosfos' question doesn't even get off the ground. Because the Rambam, as we said before, holds there's only one Isur, and that's called malacha chilul Shabbos. There may be different ways of violating that Isur, like in any lav in the Torah. That doesn't generate a lav shebechlos. From the Rambam's perspective, malacha is not a lav shebechlos. It's the very same Isur. There's only one Isur of malacha on Shabbos or Yom. But from the very fact that Tosfos classifies malacha as a lav shebechlos, we see there are separate lavim and separate Isurim included in one lav in the Torah. Whenever there's one lav in the Torah that is kolel, it comprises together many different Isurim, that's called a lav shebechlos. And Tosfos thinks that Malach on Yontif is a classic example of a lav shebechlos. And put that together with Tosfos that we started with on Daf Ayin Gimel and Beis, that Tosfos holds that there has to be a straw that mentions the malacha, either the Tolda or the Av. That's because every malacha is a separate Isur. So in order to give him a Hasra, you have to mention the name of the Isur, and the name of the Isur is that particular malacha that he's violating. Well, now Tosfos has a problem with Masechtas Sanhedrin, because if every single malacha is an independent Isur, then we have here a case of a lav shebechlos. So why do you get Malchus for Mavashel? So Tosfos comes up with a very interesting answer. He says, the Mefarish Tfei, the Torah indicates in that pasuk that there's a lav for each malacha. It's not one lav, but many lavim. There's like an abbreviated form of many lav. Why? Chesiv meleches avoda. And what does that mean? Kol malacha umalacha shehi avoda. Every single malacha that's an avoda is prohibited. So the Torah is actually in one abbreviated formulation writing many, many different lavim. It's if there are many different lavim in the Torah because it's called malacha shehi avoda. But Tosfos never moves away from his original premise that every single malacha is an Isur unto itself. Just the Tosfos vacillates from the Havmin to the other. Are all these malachas formulated under one lav in the Torah, or is the Torah giving up separate lavim for each malacha? So whereas according to Tosfos, according to the Rambam, everything is smooth. I don't even have to raise the question because the malachas are just different methods and different, I would call it different suras hamaisa. Each malacha has a different suras hamaisa, but it's all one Isur of Melecha Shabbos. God says, refrain from creative activity and categories of labor on Shabbos. It doesn't matter which category or which type of labor you decide to use it at the same time, it's always the same violation. The Rambam would never require Asra in the name of the Av. Nor would the Rambam ever dream of classifying Malacha as a Lav Shebechlos. But Tosfos Lishitosim says that no. These are not just different methods of violating Chil Shabbos, but rather Chil Shabbos is comprised of many different Isurim. That makes it a Lav Shebechlos. And if each Malacha is a separate Isur, you require Asra for the Shem Malacha. On the next page, if you have to have the pages, which is called Kuf Tzadi Heyo 195, he quotes the Tosfos Rid. And you can miss this Tosfos Rid. It's at the very beginning of Perek Poland. He writes, the Gemara says that Havara Lechalik Yotzes. According to one opinion, Havara is one of the 39 malachas, and the reason why the Torah says Lo Sevaru Eish B'chol Moshvos Seichem is Lechalik, which means to teach you that if you violate multiple malachas b'shkoga achas, then you have to bring a separate chatos for each malach. Pirush, Keva de ba'avara lechalik yotzos, ke'ilu ksiv lav hakol malacha malacha dami. When the Torah takes one lav out of the bag, in this case havara, and formulates a lav with regard to that one single malacha, that is a gili milsa. That really sheds a light on all the malachas, that each malacha has its own lav. If a person eats chelev and tam behelim achas, he has to bring 2 chatos. Why? Because each one is a separate isa. That isa lav of chelev and isa lav of dam. Here too, says the Tosfos Rid, in Melecha Shabbos, each malacha is like this malacha, you can call it dam, and this malacha chelev. Each malacha is a separate avera. Is therefore Tosfos Rid says that when the Torah took havara out of the bag and formulated a separate lav, and that was just one particular example that Torah wanted to give, that each malacha is a separate lav, I now understand that we're not talking about a lav shebechlos. If not for the fact that the Torah was machale and separated the lav of havar from the other malachas, we would have a lav shebechlos, because each malach is a separate isa. Tosfos answers, but the Torah already gave me a separate lav for each isa, so it's not a lav shebechlos. But moreover, says the Tosfos Rid, tzarich lahasros al chelev mishum chelev al dam mishum dam v'kach al kol malach malacha. You need asra on each malacha. Each malacha is a separate isur. But we call it chil Shabbos, but it's not. It's chil maleches orea and chil maleches kotzer and chil maleches havara. Each malacha is a separate avera. We just gather them together into one rubric. It's a lot easier to name it as chil Shabbos than to have to go through the list of every single moment. But each malacha is a separate avera. And if each malacha is a separate avera, we understand very well why the Tosfos Rid ends this presentation by saying that just like I need a separate asra on dam, I need a separate asra on chelev, because they're 2 separate averas, so too each malacha requires its own hasra, because each malacha is a separate avera. The Rambam, on the other hand, he sees all the malachas as just one avera of chil Shabbos. And the Ran in Masechta Sanhedrin is aware of Tosfos Kasha there about Malacha being allowed to Bechlolos, which means many Surim under one lav, and he says, no, it's not a lav Shebechlolos. Why? Havi kelota se kol malacha shekolel malachas harbe. He says that this one avera is kolel many different malachas. Why isn't it a lav shebechlolos? Not because it's a separate lav in the Torah for each malacha, but because all the malachas are really like different forms of eating dam. You would never suggest that I have to give you that dam would be a lav shebechlolos because I can give you so many different methods of eating dam. They're all the same Easter. And so too, in the case of Melecha Shabbos, I would never think that this is a lav shebechlolos because there's so many different isurim, because in truth there's only one isur. Kulam inyan echad, says the Ran. Lahainu isur malach. Beautiful. This Ran is really just formulating what we said to explain the Rambam Shita. The Rambam Shita is you don't need to asra for each malacha, because the malachas are just different ways. Like we said in dam, you don't have to give them a separate asra on eating dam this way and on eating dam that way. Behind the shame isur lo sasa kol malach. Hashal came the shitoso ein tzorch lahasos ella beisur melecha Shabbos lefud. The ayin b'minchas chinuch shedigdek came me'arambam. The Perek Zayin Milchas Shabbos Al Zayin Shein Tzorch La'asos B'Shem Ha'av Shel HaMalacha U'Kermoshe Nizbah. So we have one chakir with two nafkaminas. Nafkamina number one, is it a lav shebechlolos? Nafkamina number two, do you have to give asra in the name of the Av? And these two nafkaminas really emanate from exactly the same root. If each malach is a separate malach, I have here a lav shebechlolos, and I have to answer that question. If each malach is a separate isur, then I need asra in the name of the malach. If, on the other hand, we view them all as one single, indivisible isur that can be fulfilled in many different ways, in different suras hamalacha, then it's not a lav shebechlolos because it's only one lav and one isur, and there's no need to give asra b'shem ha'av or b'shem ha'tov. And now we go on to nafkamina number 3. This is the opening sugya in Masechta Bava Kama. The Gemara says that what's the difference between an Av and a Told? So the Gemara gives one answer according to the Chachamim and another answer according to Rabbi Elazar. According to the Chachamim, you know what's the difference between an Av and a Toldo? Ilu Ovid shtei Avos b'hari adadi mechuiva kol chadav v'chadav. Ilu Ovid Av v'Toldo v'dei lo mechayev el echad. By classifying a Toldo under an Av, in a case where you violated both the Av and the Toldo b'shogeg, you will only bring one chatos. Whereas if you violated two different Avos, you bring two different chatos, even though it was one shgaga. If we go back to the case of notea, for example, if a person was notea a shasil, meaning an elon, and he was oreya zraim, bahari adodi, meaning with one alama, according to Rabbanon, he brings only one chatos, because that's called av v'toldo dideh. If, on the other hand, he would be Zorea and Kotzer Be'elimachas, he would bring two chatos. Because those are two avos. And here we have a clear-cut difference between an av and a toldo. When you violate an av with its toldo, you only bring one chatos. You violate two different avos, you bring two different chatos. And Rashi has a very strange comment. Rashi says, in a case where he violated an av and it's tolda, lo mechayv elachado a'av moloch, aval tolda didein lo mechayv. Rashi is outspoken. There's no chiyuv for the tolda, only for the av. Hell, Rashi. Why is the av inferior to the tolda? If he would have violated the tolda on its own, he would definitely be chayav achatas. The tolda generates a chiyuv chata. Now he violated an av and it's tolda, he should be chayav shtayim, but there's halacha that if you violated the same Isa time after time, you get away with one chatas. Divrei Rashi tmur miod. Divrei pshuto v'avid tolda tamu dienu chayav alachas v'shub v'avid tolda lekach chiluk chatos v'chayav chatas achas al shteir v'oshe ibu chil Shabbos b'shtei avos. My time of Hutzok Rashi Lomer Dala told her ain't no chayav chatas. Why? You violate the av over and over again, you're chayav for both avos, both repetitions, but there's a din that if there's no chiluk, then you bring one chatas for both of them. He gives an example of Zorei Notea. So why does Rashi insist that he's only chayav for the av and not for the tolda? Let's try to understand Rashi based on the Rambam. In other words, a priori, we don't know that Rashi accepted the Rambam's definition that all the malachas are really part of one violation, one isur, and they're just different methods of violating that single isur. We don't know that Rashi would subscribe to that position. But if that's going to shed a light on this Rashi, then it's very likely that Rashi accepted this position. He says the following. If a person violates two avos, behari adodi, let's say Zoreh and Kotze, he's chayav two chatos. According to the Rambam, why is that so? Bishlam, according to Tosfos holds that every single malach is a separate avera. So it's like eating dam and chelev behelim achas. You have to bring two chatos. If you did two avos, you have to bring two chatos. But according to the Rambam, this is two avos. It's just the same thing as eating dam and then eating dam again. It's the same avera. There's only one avera. Achein yesod advar the afal gav the kol haovos. Heim enam isurim mechulakim. They're all one isur. Mikol and here Rav Soloveitchik invokes the sugi increases. Avi kemo gufin mechulakim. The Gemara says that if a man would violate erva, 5 different arayos with 5 different women, the same erva. Let's say she's a nida. And he done a b'mezid, he's chayiv kares for each ma'isa aver with a nida. Now he does it b'shogeg. He should bring one chatas. They should let him off the hook with one chatas because it's the same avera over and over again. The Gemara postulates he has to bring a separate chatas for each nida. Why? Because a gufin mechulakim. Each woman is a separate category, so to speak. Rashi in the Masechta Shabbos in Beis over Beis compares Tchina and Ktsira, which are 2 different avos, to Shnei Gufin. Why does Rashi need Shnei Gufin? Why does it just say Shtei avos? Rashi's trying to tell you why, in the case of Shtei avos, you have to bring 2 chatos. Because Lechora, if Rashi subscribes to the position of the Rambam, there's no justification to demand 2 chatos when he violates 2 malachos, because it's all one Isur. It's like dam and dam. But the answer is, says Rashi, gufim mechulakim. There's a separate din of a machalik in chatas that generates its own chiyuv chatas, like gufim mechulakim or malachos mechulakim. Every single av malach is a different suras havera, and that shinui, that chiluk in suras havera is enough to be mechayev a separate carbon for each one, like 5 nidos, which is gufim mechulakim. Bobby, is that you? There's a problem here with in Zoom. If somebody wants to say something, they put a hand up. Oh, okay. Now I see what happened. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know if Bobby's around or not around. You never know. When someone turns on Zoom and he does his laundry, oh, Bobby's driving.
I'm driving. That's why I didn't put her on.
Okay. Have a safe drive, Bobby.
Right.
Okay. I feel like I'm watching a movie. In the movies, they show you people driving and stuff. All right. So every single malacha is a separate ma'isa malacha with its own particular tsuras hamalacha, and that creates a chiluk like gufim mechulakim. That's halacha in hilchas chiyuvei chatos. But as far as the Isser is concerned, he really repeats the same Isser again and again. And therefore, let's say I ate dam, chas v'shalom, right, b'shogeg. If I ate one kazayis dam, which was roasted, and another kazayis dam, which was cooked, and one I chewed and one I swallowed, I don't know, different suras ha'achila, then enochinami, each one would require its own chatas. And why? Because of the din of gufim mechulakim. Is therefore 2 avos is havile maise avera chalukim zemizeh ulahachi yesh chiluk chatos lechol malach umalach. What do we gain from this? We have at least 2 benefits, maybe even a third. Number 1, Rabbi Lazar is of the opinion that if you do an av and it's toldo, the Gemara therefore asks again, according to Rabbi Lazar, what's the difference between an av and a toldo? Now, certainly the av and the toldo are one avera. Why would Rabbi Lazar say yichayv shtayim? And the answer is because the toldo is a different surah, and that creates a chiluk no different than gufim mechulakim in 5 nidos. Beautiful. On the contrary, we have to figure out the Chachamim sheet. How could the Chachamim say that on an av and a toldo you chayiv only 1 chatos, whereas on 2 different avos you chayiv shnayim? The reason why you chayiv shnayim in 2 different avos is because each av separates itself as a separate machalik, a separate tzuras hamalacha. That should apply logically to an av and a toldo. I'll give you an example. Is an av of notea when he takes a zera and he puts it into the ground. There's a tolda of zoreh when he already has a seed in the ground and he's mashkiz roim. 2 different pu'ulos, entirely different. One is putting a seed in the ground, the other is pouring water over a seed in the ground. And if they're 2 different suros, one is the av and one is the tolda, then certainly should be chayiv shtayim, no different than 2 different avos. And that's Rabbi Lazar's shita, that you chayiv shtayim for an av and a tolda. But now we have a problem with the Rabbanan shita. Why did the Rabbanan say that for 2 different avos you chayiv shtayim, but for 1 av and it's tolda you chayiv 1 chatas? What happened to the din of Machalkim, of Gufim Machalkim? Says Rav Soloveitchik, here's game number 2. That's why Rashi had a problem in this sugya. Why did Rashi come up with this new svara that a av chayev, a toldo lo mechayev? Why? Tolda can generate a chatos. If you violated Tolda b'mezid yechayev skila, if you had a Eid Basra, the answer is Rashi had a problem. He couldn't figure out why in two Avos, according to the Chacham, you chayev shtayim, but in Av and Tolda the day you're only chayev achas. Rabbi Lazar makes a lot more sense. Let's be consistent. If for two Avos you have a din of machalik, even though it's part of one Avera, then in Av and Tolda the day you have two different Surah Samalach and Gufim Mechulakim, you should be chayev shtayim. Why did the Rabbanan say you chayev achas? The answer is you chayev achas because you're only chayev for the Av. You're not chayev for the Tolda. If you'd be chayev for the Tolda, you'd have to bring two chatos. No way out of that. So Rav Salvation now asks himself, so why taka you're not chayev for the Tolda? And he writes on the bottom of this page, Kasavar, the Ikar or Isar or Av. We have something called an Ikar and a Tofel. So if the Tofel is a Chiyuv Misa, Chiyuv Shog, or Kares, whatever it is, so the Shogi you have to bring a Chat. But if you did the Ikar and the Tolda, then there's a brand new halacha. And that halacha is that the Ikar, so to speak, swallows up the Tolda. Tolda Edo Edabe Eina, it's not the Ikar Maisa Avera halacha. Valkein Havi Ki Iser Tofel Legabi Allah. So we have an Ikar Iser and a Tofel. The Iser Tofel loses its, shall we say, identity when it was done together with the Av. The Ein Ala Tosefes Chiyuv, Ein Tosefes Chiyuv Ala Tolda. And now we get up to page 196. How do you have it listed? David, are you there? Okay. Look, you got to do. Oh, you are here. Oh, great. So how did we list it? Do we have it listed as 196?
Now let me look. I'll tell you.
Oh, okay. I thought you might remember. I didn't want to be matriach you.
Oh, it's fine. You said 196.
No, maybe I don't know exactly whether you translated the Hebrew numbers into,
Right. So Kuf Tzadi Vav, 196.
Oh, so say Kuf Tzadi Vav.
Yeah.
He says the following. What happens, according to the Rabbanon, if you violate two Toldos of the same Av? And there are millions of cases like that. Would you be chayav achas or shtayim? Well, if this halach of machalek, like gufim mechulakim, then two Toldos have two different suros, each be chayav shtayim. Elamai, in the case where he violates a Tolda and it's Av, Rashi has this brand new shita that the Ikar halav swallows up the lav tofel, and he's only chayav achas. But if he did two different Toldas, there's no Ikar, there's no tofel, he should be chayav shtayim. Barekan lo shaycha, as far as Rashi, the hu enu chayav ala Av, there is no Av. Travayu told us Ninu, and they're both equal. They're both on the same level. Umikomakom hem shtei Toldos hachalukim zemizeh. There's a machalik here. In the case of an Av, and it's told there's a machalik, but we have a loch of Iker and Tofel. But in the case of two Toldos of one Av, we have a machalik without an Iker and Tofel. The tzarech is that we never found anyone to say that if he violates two Toldos the same Av, then he's chayav shtayim. He's only chayav shtayim if he does two Avos, or an Av and a Tolda of a different Av. But if he violates two Toldos of the same Av, Milsa the pshita kuliyamal opligis chayav achas. Why? In Nire, the b'shtei Toldos shalav echad. Hello, Ikar Achivu Rak ala Dimyon Shalahem La'av. Interesting. You have to be very creative. You're chayav for the Tolda because of the Av. So in two Toldas that belong to the same Av, then basically you could collapse those two chiyuvim into one. Ubazeh me'ein malach achas mamash. Aval b'mat shehem chalukim me'av Al zel lekem chayiv. All right, now we fast forward to number base. We started with Tosfos on Daf Ayin Gimel and base. Tosfos holds that every malacha is a separate aver. Hence, it's not enough to give a general hasra and say don't be machal Shabbos like the Rambam Shita, but rather you have to mention what? The Av, the Tolda, both. What do you have to mention? Tosfos thought initially had a raya that the hasra for the Tolda has to be b'shem Av, because the Gemara says that notea mavrich and marki b'chayev mishum zoreya, to tell you that you have to give hasra b'shem Av. The Tosfos says no, there's no proof. Maybe hasra b'shem Tolda would be sufficient without mentioning the Av, but if you mention the Av, just get it right, and then that could also be a valid hasra. What's it all about? What lies at the heart of Tosfos' vacillation back and forth about the nature of hasra? Hasra b'shem HaTolda, or do we require hasra b'shem HaAv? Furthermore, there's a Tosfos at the beginning of Bava Kama, the sugya that we mentioned before. He says, Rabbi Eliezer to Mechayiv HaTolda Makom Av. The Gemara says, according to Rabbi Eliezer, if you violate an Av, it's told Yichayv Shtayim. Amai Korele Av, Amai Korele Told. The Gemara asks a very naive question. Why should Rabbi Eliezer bother categorizing an Av and a Tolda? What difference does it make whether it's an Av and a Tolda? Even if you violate an Av and it's told Yichayv Shtayim, so the Tolda has the same identical status in Allah as the Av. Tosfos, I don't get it. I'll tell you the difference between an Av and a Tolda. In the case of a Tolda, you have to mention the Av. Your hasra would have to be b'shem Av. Whereas in the case of an Av, that's exactly what your hasra is giving. But you might have thought that in the case of a Tolda, it's sufficient that you give hasra b'shem Tolda. No, you have to give hasra b'shem Av, because the Tolda is not the shame of the Isa. Now that the Gemara omitted that and is stuck with this question, why do you call this an Av, call Tolda Ma'id Afkamina? Apparently, you don't need a hasra b'shem Av. You can give hasra b'shem Tolda. Below Meshadi says Tosfos Delachi Korele Av. Did Tzarech la'asos HaTolda Makom Av? Because the answer is there's no special requirement, because the yichus of an Av that you have to mention the hasra b'shem Av. So salvation says, I don't understand. So, ikadaf kamina ba'ad korele Av. Darei gavim efshal hasus al Tolda b'shma, aval sof kol sof efshal hasus ba gamal b'shem Av. In the case of an Av, by calling it an Av, you broaden the opportunity for hasra. We would have said that you have to give hasra the name of the Tolda. And of course, you could not give hasra from one Tolda to the other, but in the case of an Av, it has a special yichus, that if you gave the hasra on the Tolda b'shem Av, it would be a valid hasra. Why? Because of the Av. That's the special status of the Av. In case Shaper Ikanaf Kabina, Bahada Korele Av, by calling it and classifying it as an Av, you have enough Kabina. Why is the Gemara looking? So Tosfos answers, well, I'll tell you the truth. The Gemara didn't want to give that answer because the Gemara holds that you can give Asra for the Tolda. And there's no need to give Asra on the Tolda the Shema Av. Yeah. But still there's an Afkamina, because the Av has that special unique status that if you gave Asra the Tolda b'Shem Av, it would be a valid Asra. Now he quotes the Tosfos, V'im Tomar V'nema, this is the bottom right column, Nafkamina Linyan Asra, Shetzorach Lahasos HaTolda, Mishum Av Dite. Yamrina beperk tolin mishamer mishumai masribe. So mishamer means he uses a sieve to separate the sediments of the wine from the rest of the wine. And Rabbah mishum borer, by getting rid of the sediments and separating them, he violates Melchas borer. And Rabbi Zera Omar mishum meraket. Right, meraket means when you shake it up and down in a sieve, and the thinner part or the liquid part goes through the holes. That's called meraket. But we see clearly that you have to give Asra the name of the Av, because the Gemara is saying, "My master." What Asra are you going to give him in the case of Mishamer? Are you going to give him Asra b'shem borer or b'shem meraket? The Tol says clearly this proves that the Asra and the Tolda must mention the name of the Av. The Yeshlomar, the Hachi part, Mishomai Masr Beishu Chayev. In other words, you don't have to give Asra the name of the Av, but get it right. Rabbah says that Mishum Borer, Hisrubo Mishum Meraket Potter. The Keva do Maser B'Dover Chain and Dome, Sover Malibo Potter. Amal Hisrubo V'Yomer Al Tishamer. If you just mention the name of the Tolda, Chayev. Meaning that Tosfos says that even if you're not Chayev to be Maser on the Tolda B'Shem Av, but nevertheless, it's valid if you mention the name of the Av as long as you got the right appropriate Av. So once again, we see an afkamina between an Av and a Tolda. Okay. So now we're up to a paragraph called Venira on the left column. Venira al pia mavur b'yisoda din hasra b'shema av b'yisodahu b'shum de be'inin hasra b'shema isa b'chol malach malach b'shem isa b'fnei atzma. Right, this is Tosfos Shita that we've been emphasizing over and over again, that each Av, each Malacha is a separate independent Isa. And we said, therefore, it's El Lav Shebechlolos, and in a case of two different Avos, Behelimachas, he has to bring two Chatos. These are separate Isa. Every Malacha sets itself as a separate Isa against the Rambam. Umiated near the beer spekas at Tosfos. I'm going to cover the page for a minute. This is what I like to do to challenge myself. Let's ask the following question. Yeah, every malacha is a separate Easter according to Tosfos. But what about Toldos? And we can say it in one or two ways. Yeshlach. Either we could say that every Toldos is a separate Easter. I just derive it from the Av. But once I have the Av, now I can generate many different Isurim under that Av. But each Easter is an independent Easter. But we say no. When it comes to Toldos, then for sure the Rambam is right, so to speak, that every single Toldos is just a different surah, a different method of violating the Av. And then Afkamina is going to be Hasra. Because if I postulate that from the Av I derive many different Isurim, and each Tolda is a separate Isur, then I need Asra b'Shema Tolda, because Asra has to be b'Shema Isur. If, on the other hand, the Toldas are nothing more than a Hechetimtza, a different scenario, a different method of violating the same Av, but the violation is really the Av, then Asra should be b'Shema Av. Let's see if I got it right. Ume'ata nira b'bir spekas atosvis im tzarich lahasus atoldo b'shema av the yesod sofek atosvisu be'ikar din av v'toldo b'Shabbos the alfina le'alon mikra the achas mehena that toldos heim b'chlal ha'avos ha'im be'emes leka elo lamites yisuri malachos b'Shabbos But told the same Bichlala Isur Shel Avos. The Yesoda Isur B'Toldu Rak Mitzad Shumei Av. I think we said it a little better, but anyway. Va'Isur B'Mashkiz Royim Umishum Da'avili Me'ein Malecha Zorea. O Dilma Va'Isur Shel Toldu Isur B'Fnei Atzmo V'Ikar Adin Shel Tolda Hu Echad Gimel Midas Shator Nidreshes By. The Alfinon L'Isur Malecha Tolda Me'av Shalom. The Kshem Sha'av Hu B'Chlal Lo Tasek HaMalacha Kach Kol HaTolados Nichlolu B'Krah De Lo Tasek HaMalacha. Aval Kol Tolda Asura Mitzad Shem Malacha Shalom B'Atzma V'Gam Mashkiz Roim Havi Malacha Asura B'Shabbos. I think it's exactly what we were saying. Yasher Lefi Zeh Yesh Nafkamina B'Din Gam Bozeh Gam B'Din Hasra. Just 1 second. Would this have any impact on Chatos? Let's just, each Tolda is a separate Isur, just that's derived from the Av. Then, if you violated, if you did 2 Toldas, same Av, so then you chayv Achas. And that's like eating Dam and Dam. But if, on the other hand, you violated and told hey, you say great to the Rabbanon, violates 2 Avos, he brings 2 Chatos. Violates an Av and it's Tolda, he brings only 1 Chat. That's very different. Yeah, I just realized something. That if we go with the approach that the Tolda needs its own Hasra, because every Tolda, having derived its existence from the Av, now sets itself up as a separate independent Isur, then in that case, if a person violates an Av and its own Tolda, it should be Chayv Shtayim. Again, we're going to have to come back to that Rashi about Ikar and Tafel. Okay. The Ima Isur B'Tolda Umitzad Mein Ha'av Sheba Im Kein Tzarech Lahasros B'Tolda B'Shem Ha'av Shalom. If the Tolda is just a way of violating the Av, and you're chayv really for the Av, then the Asra should be B'Shem Ha'av. Yisrael Shem Ha'Isur Shalom. Ulam. Ima Isur Shal Tolda Isur B'Fnei Atmo, Im Kein Efshal Ha'asros Bo Gam Ala Tolda B'Shmo. Dizeh Shem Ha'Isur Shalom U'Ba'afi Sagi. But why is it valid if he mentions the Av? I mean, Tosus says that you can have a Asra B'Shem HaTolda. That's good. That we understand, because once having derived the Tolda for the Av, the Tolda sets up as a separate Isur. But how does it work when he gives Asra B'Shem HaAv? Is that a valid question? Let me just think.
What do you mean? You're saying just if he says the Av? Not the
Right.
Tolda?
He omits mention of the Tolda. Now we're saying the Tolda is a separate Isur. We just derive it from the Av. Is there some new halacha in Hilchas Hasra that if you derive B from A, then you can mention A in the Hasra, and that's all you need? I don't know. We're now introducing new categories into the picture of Hasra. I don't know. Umiata nira od tilahach tzad desagi lahasos betolda b'shma bemis mitzad ikar adin kol hadin asra shelo rak b'shem shel tolda. Oh, I think he's asking our question. The Hashem Isur shelo mitzad Hashem shel tolda v'lo b'shem ha'av umay demahani lahasos betolda gam b'shem ha'av shelo. He's asking our question. Nira zeu mishum de b'shem ha'av nichlal gam ha'tolda. Oh, okay. He's pulling a fast one here. A whole new halacha here. That when you mention the Av, in effect, you're mentioning the Tolda. Because Nichal B'Shem Ha'av is the Tolda.
Yeah, it's like an umbrella. It covers all the Toldos automatically.
Right. I say Bruce already changed his clock like we did in Israel. Ukishu Masra.
Aren't we supposed to?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything to follow the leader when it comes to changing the clock. Okay.
Well, I assume that 3:15 is 3:15 in Israel.
I apologize.
Did you change it to 2:15?
No. Just this week. It's not relevant. Mikan Lahabo. It's just this week because they come out of davening in Clanton Park. Where are you, Bruce? Where are you located, Bruce? I speak a little louder because I'm
sorry, I had it on mute. I'm down
Oh.
the street from you. I'm right off of Emek Rifa'im.
Oh, so for you, it's already now almost 3:15.
Yeah.
But in Canada, we usually have the shir 8:15, right? Is
Oh.
that, no, did I get that
Yeah.
right? 8:15.
Yeah.
Oh, so you did it at 2:15
Yeah, I got that right.
today.
So 8:15 in Canada is now
It's-
2:15, but it's only relevant to this week when there's a discrepancy because
Ah.
they didn't
So
want
this
to change.
week I missed. So
Look,
this
they
week,
refused to change that clock. What could I do?
so this week I missed it. So I apologize.
All right. No, it's not your fault. I mean, it's my fault if I didn't tell you, but you have to send me your email or whatever. So Anyway, it's
I'll
not-
do that.
it's not relevant to next week. Next week, we start the Sugi of Chanukah and Hegyonei Halacha Bli Neder,
Okay.
and we're going to learn at 3:15 on our clock here in
All right.
Emek Rifa'im, right? Okay. Ukshu, but you can listen to the next 2-3 minutes and you'll catch hopefully the whole shir because I know how genius you are. Ukshu Masra B'Shema Av Havi Lekeilu Hisra Gamkein Ala Tolda Shma. It's almost like a literary game over here. When I mention the Av to the person who's about to Chas V'Shalom violate the Shabbos, I'm really giving him the whole list of the Toldos. Because all the Toldos are derived and inherent in here in the Av. Aval sof, the real Hasra is from the Tolda because the Tolda is a separate Isser. Zeu Iker Din Hasra Shal HaTolda, the Shapir Baruch Gemara, till Rabbi Lazar Mike Karile Av, he came into the MS, Al Bidin, Chalos, Shem Hasra, Ein Toli, B'Shem Shal HaAvel, B'Shem Shal HaTolda. Beautiful. Now we have an answer to the question that was bothering our mind. Toldos asks, why is the Gemara looking for an afkamina between an Av and a Tolda according to Rabbi Lazar? Of course, Rabbi Lazar is of the opinion that if you violate the Av and it's told you Chayiv Shtayim, why not introduce the fact that you have to give Asra B'Shem Av? And that's a special status of the Av. So the answer is no. You don't have to give an Asra B'Shem Av. So we asked, but you could give Asra B'Shem Av. That itself should be enough to indicate and reflect on the special status, the upgrade status of the Av. And that would be an afkamina between the Av and the Tolda. The answer is yes. You can give Asra B'Shem Av, but you should know that Al Pi Din, according to the halacha, you are giving Asra on the Tolda. It's just that the Av, on a level of communication, has within it the Tolda. But the real chalos of Asra is B'Shem HaTolda, because the Tolda emerges as a separate affair. So just to summarize, because we all need a review, and Bruce also came a little bit later. So here's what we're saying. We're saying that the Rambam Shita is that all the malachas really fit into one single Isur, and that's Chilul Shabbos. The Rambam would therefore not require Asra, not B'Shem Av, not B'Shem Tolda. Just tell him not to be Mechel Shabbos. That's number one. Tosis, on the other hand, is of the opinion that Shabbos is made up of many different Isurim. How many? So at stage number one, we say that it's made up of 39 Isurim. Tosis thinks, therefore, it's a Lav Shebechlolos. And since there are 39 Isurim in Shabbos, Each malacha requires its own hasra. What about the relationship between a tolda and an av? The Gemara says that according to the Rabbanan, if you violated an av and it's tolda, behalim achas, you're only chayav achas. It means that the tolda, according to Chachamim, is nothing more than a different method of violating the av. But Rabbi Eliezer disagrees, and he says in the case of av tolda di day chayav shtayim, could be one of two things. Either Rabbi Eliezer holds that every tolda sets itself up as a separate isa, a separate avera, or maybe Rabbi Eliezer holds that even if the tolda is part of the av, and it's another method of violating the av, but nevertheless we have a din of mechulakim, like in the case of gufim mechulakim in Baal Shchaveshni. Okay, then this is where we'll stop, and if it's Hashem, I'll see you on Hanukkah, so to speak.
I
Thank
just
you.
sent you the email.
Thanks.
Aaron Goldscheider gave me your email address.
Great.
So you should have it. Okay. Next
All
week
right.
I'll see you. Thank you very much.
Okay, all the best. All too.
Go ahead. So you'll send me my kindness by Tuesday, right?
Yeah. Wait, you have Hegioni Aloha, correct?
I have Bobby's copy, yes.
Okay, so that's going to be a cinch. I don't have it in front of me, but it's probably the first piece on Hanukkah. I think it deals with Beis Hillel Beit Shammai. I'm not sure.
Would the old version of the electronic version there be good enough or not?
Well, I had the old version I actually have here in the room.
Yeah. That's what I have on my Extra Chachma, the old version.
So if you have the old version,
Well, I got the
Then-
paper one and electronic on both. Right?
then the first piece on Hanukkah, just give me a second, is Lama Kavu Shmonas Yimei Hanukkah. Oh, you know what? I'm a little bit less interested in that. Let me just see. There is Beso Mitzvahs Mahadri.
Right.
So it's on page 209. But don't, give me another few days. I'll look in the new version just to see if that's the one we want to do. Okay, then?
Sure.
But
Yeah.
if you don't hear from me, then that's the one we're going to do. Mitzvahs Mahadrin. It's Simon Lamed Gimel on page 209. Okay, then?
The page numbers might be different in electronic version because it's old, right? But
Well, if you have the old version,
I have that one too. That's Bobby's. Gotta have.
so what I just read from is this, what I just told you
Yeah,
before.
the paper one, right?
I don't know if the electronic one is different. That I don't know.
Right. So, okay.
Well, but again, I'm giving you three simanim here. One siman is, one siman muvak that we're on the same page is that it's called number Lamed Gimel. That should be approved.
Right.
Second siman, it's called Mitzvahs Mahadrin.
Okay.
And the third siman it's called page 209. So one of those simanim will probably lead you to
Got it.
the right
Right.
place. But in any event, give me a chance to double check it,
Yeah.
because I have the new version, and sometimes he adds a whole new piece into the new version.
Okay,
So I
great.
want to make sure
I
that.
was just thinking that the electronic version is much easier to read than taking the photograph of the phone and other nonsense, right?
Yeah.
But if they're doing newer content, there's no point. They'll just go with
But when you say, David, the electronic version, is that something that I can get access to, or only you have access to it?
I mean, I paid for extra content, that's why I have it.
Oh, it's called Otzar Chachma?
It's in extra Chachma, yeah.
Oh, I think I can get access to Otzar Chachma, but it's
I think via YU you might be able to.
correct. As a Musmach of YU, or
Yeah.
my son has Otzar Chachma.
Yeah.
Yeah, the electronic version is much better. You don't have to take pictures, and it comes
That's
out
my point,
clear.
right? You just make a PDF, send it out, and it's easily, it's very readable. The photographs don't always, right? So that's why I'm asking. But
So again, I just want to repeat the announcement this week because in Canada, they didn't change the clock.
right,
So there was a discrepancy of 6 hours instead of 7 hours.
exactly.
And we started earlier, but next week, we're back because we both
Yeah.
here and there changed the clock. So we'll go back to 3:15.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can tell you with my job, with my primary job, not secondary job is easier. My primary job, clock change weekends are always crazy because there's all kinds of stuff we have to do to get ready for the clock change.
Wait, David, you spoke too fast for me. Say it one more
Sorry,
time.
I said in my job, right? Whenever there's a clock change weekend in either direction.